Hello, this is Chris Doggett, and I'd like to talk just a little bit about honeybee pollination. The transfer of pollen grains from the anther, the male part of the flower, to the stigma, the female part. Cross-pollination is the transfer of pollen from one plant to the stigma of another. And after pollination, of course, fruit and seeds develop and mature. Now, plants, like humans and most other people, avoid self-fertilization. So either the stigma ripens first and can only be fertilized from an older flower, or in other plants the opposite occurs. In some plants there are separate male and female flowers, squashes and watermelons as an example. And then in yet in other crops there are separate male and female plants. Examples of that are the mulberry and the olive. Honeybee pollination has been on co-evolution with plants. The plant needs pollination and the honeybee needs pollen. You'll know that individual honeybees tend to visit the same kind of flower on a foraging trip. Once they have found a variety of flower they like, they will tend always to go back to it. Pollen sticks to the hairy body of the bee and transfers to other flowers as she moves to them. Honeybees actively seek out flowers with pollen, while other kinds of pollinators are primarily interested in nectar. And here, as an example, is a picture of a honeybee absolutely covered in pollen, which sticks to all the hairy parts of its body, even its eyes. Why do honeybees collect pollen? Well, it's a food source. It's 6 to 28% protein with lipids and sterols, and it makes bee bread. 125 to 150 milligrams of pollen is needed to rear one worker larva. Now, the bees in collecting pollen will pick up something like 15 milligrams per load, and a colony will want to consume something like 20 kilograms. That's 1.3 million foraging trips per colony. Here's a picture of a honeybee with its pollen packs on its back legs absolutely full of pollen. And similarly, the rear view of a bee who has just come back from a great foraging trip. Again, a picture of a honeybee with the pollen stuck to all the parts of its body. Crops that are pollinated by honeybees are quite a long list, and there's a slide here with the list on it. You'll know mostly, of course, about almonds in California that need pollination by honeybees, but there are many other crops as well. 1/3 of all our food is directly or indirectly dependent on pollination by bees. And it's worth something like $15 billion in the United States. If the bees are not there to pollinate, this picture shows the alternative, which is folks climbing into trees and essentially moving pollen from one flower to another. Not a practical proposition. If you look at this picture of what you can buy today at the supermarket, it's interesting to note that the next picture would show you what you can get if the bees were not there to pollinate. A tremendous difference. And the bees are very necessary to the ongoing life that we live and the products that we like to consume.